Okay, part 5. Preparing the ritual. After returning to the castle and gathering with everyone for dinner, I reported the summary of our tour to Sylvester, then inquired about budgets and moving furniture. Our discussion proceeded without incident, as expected, since he generally gave permission for everything I asked. The temple is ready to accept Melkor and the other children, I said, but there is still a mountain of problems to deal with, such as... We lack the manpower for spring prayer. Ferdinand is gone, and Melkor is still too young to be of any use. We had yet to make up for losing Ferdinand, a loss so great that my guard knights had needed to participate in our duchy's most recent dedication ritual. And now the purge had cost the temple many blue priests. The burden on those who remained would be immense during this year's spring prayer, so planning how we were going to delegate the work was of the utmost importance. There is no helping that Melkor has not yet learned to channel mana, but something needs to be done, I said. The original plan had been for Melkor to begin his practice during last year's Archduke Conference, so that he could assist us with this year's spring prayer, but during that same Archduke Conference, Ferdinand and Linda's engagement had been announced. How had the engagement ended up affecting Melkor? Well, Ferdinand had spent his remaining time in Ehrenfest educating me and preparing his successors, which meant he had seldom left the temple or contributed mana to the foundation. This reduced supply of mana had forced the Archducal couple to work overtime, so Florencia and Bonifacius had been too busy supplying the foundation to support Melkor. On top of that, everyone's schedule had more or less exploded when the purge occurred earlier than expected. And of course, Florencia's pregnancy had then necessitated that Melkor be moved to the northern building. Charlotte had an entire season to practice before her first spring prayer, I noted. But it still ended up being a struggle for her. It would be outright dangerous for Melkor when he has no prior experience to rely on. But I really want to participate this year, Melkor interjected, clearly vexed. Sylvester and Florencia exchanged troubled looks. After everything that had happened over the past year, they had both been much too busy to help their son prepare. It may not be feasible for you to practice supplying mana to the castle foundation, I said to Melkor, but you can practice offering up mana in the temple. If you take it seriously, you should be ready to join us next year. Having him participate this year was entirely out of the question. I continued, as you know, for spring prayer, the Gabe-ruled provinces are given chalices and nothing else. We are not required to perform religious ceremonies for them as we do for the farming towns of the central district. No grey priests are required, so we could solve our management problem by sending my retainers to the various provinces instead. The only issues are that the bulk of my adult retainers are guard knights, and those who are still underage cannot leave the city. For obvious reasons, we can't risk cutting back on your knights, Sylvester said. I nodded. That was clear to anyone, and it was the greatest fault with my idea. Cornelius had mentioned it when I brought this up before. We can throw money at most of our problems, I said. The carriages, food, chefs, attendants, and ceremonial robes. A few simple payments can take them off our minds. But nothing can be done about our lack of manpower. Wolfrid, who had been listening in silence, suddenly looked up. What if Charlotte and I go from province to province with the remaining blue priests, while Hartman and you circle the central district? What? I replied, but you and Charlotte are busy enough, are you not? The process might only involve visiting the Giebs and giving them chalices, but it takes several days and can be physically draining. Since the temple has been entrusted to me, I thought it would be best for those who are already occupied to only help with the nearest parts of the central district. Wolfrid shrugged. If I want the Lies Gang's support, I'll need to meet with them as many times as I can. Not to mention having Charlotte and me go to those provinces will make it clear to all the nobles that we are involved with religious ceremonies too. In the past, we mana-rich Archduke candidates had circled the central district to minimize travel time and improve its harvest to match those of the Giebs provinces. This apparently led to the nobles to assume that Wilfrid and Charlotte weren't doing anything. The nobles have all heard about your Gutenberg's travels and the Haldensdale miracle, but the only ones who know about Charlotte's and my involvement are our retainers. And even that's just because they accompany us. It seems to me that the Lies Gangs think you're the only one being made to perform religious ceremonies. Lampert mentioned as much after gathering some intelligence. I hadn't noticed that at all. I'd only elected to visit the provinces myself because my panda bus was the most efficient way to move large groups of adults from one place to another. It hadn't occurred to me that my efforts were making other nobles assume that I was being worked to the bone. I agree with Wilfrid. It might be a good idea for us to visit the Giebs, Charlotte said. We may have further to travel as a result, but that shouldn't be an issue when we have our high beast to rely on. Like me, she had a drivable high beast capable of transporting the chalices. That would save a lot of time. Wilfrid nodded at her. It might be a good idea to have the blue priests circle the central district instead. I want to meet with as many Giebs as I can. Perhaps it would be best for you to focus on the south of Ehrenfest, Charlotte suggested. As the next Archduke, you will need to greet the new tentative Giebs. Wolfrey paused in thought, then nodded again. Yeah, most of the new Geebs are in the south, so I should go there and go to Groschel. It seemed that he really was focused on making connections with Lysgang nobles. In that case, I said, I will take care of the central district. I would also like to visit Kernberger, so I plan to take the Gutenbergs there. Sylvester eyed me carefully. It won't be easy having to give mana to all those farming villages, but Spring Prayer has a direct impact on our harvest. There's also our joint research with Frembeltag. I'm counting on you, Rosemine. I nodded, relieved that we had solved our problem. Rosemine, Wolfried said, you mentioned that you're going to be spending all your time in the temple realm, right? Could you bring the ritual for obtaining divine protections forward a little? If we can demonstrate that even adults can secure new protections by participating in religious ceremonies, then my retainers should be more open to my doing all this. As it turned out, his retainers had made it very clear that they didn't want him participating in Spring Prayer. They thought it would be too dangerous for him to travel all around the duchy. Wolfried had tried to argue that it was his duty as an Archduke candidate, but to be honest, I understood where they were coming from. I myself had been attacked during my first Spring Prayer. If you are going to be in danger, then perhaps I should make some protective charms for you and Charlotte, I mused aloud. Maybe I should give them to each, one to block physical attacks and another to block a mana attack. This would keep them safe during the start of an ambush, and their guard not to be able to deal with things from there. As I was considering which of the charms I was wearing would work best, Charlotte smiled at me. Though he won't be joining us for Spring Prayer, Melkor will surely pout if we don't give him some charms as well. I turned to look at Melkor, who puffed out his cheeks and muttered, I won't pout. I decided to make some charms for him, too. Sylvester clapped his hands together, trying to regain our attention. Rosemary received correspondence from Ferdinand this afternoon. He wants some of his personal belongings to be sent to Arensbach, alongside his engagement gifts. He has asked that you oversee this request since you have the key to his estate, but assures us that the attendant he left behind will take care of things if shown the letter. Send a scholar of yours later on. Understood, I replied. Is Ferdinand doing well? I couldn't imagine that much had changed since our reunion for the Interduchy tournament. Sylvester frowned. He seems fine, but things are getting complicated over there. He's going to be performing Arensbach's Spring Prayer. What? That didn't make any sense. Ferdinand wasn't yet married to Detlinde, meaning he was formally still a citizen of Ehrenfest. Not to mention, other duchies were strongly biased against the temple and religious ceremonies, so why on earth would Arensbach want a member of his archducal family involved in one? Arensbach is suffering a mana shortage, Sylvester said, but Ferdinand still can't help to supply its foundation. This is just an assumption, but I think Ob Arensbach has passed away, and they've started dyeing their foundational magics with his successor's mana. I don't think they're doing that yet. Florencia, whom I could guess had already seen the letter, put a hand on her cheek and sighed. It seems that Lady Letizia will be taking part as well. Lady Detlinde was apparently trying to make her supply the foundation directly, and with that practice, since she heard that our baptized Archduke candidates have been providing their mana. It sounds as if some very important details about our ceremonies have been misconstrued, Charlotte said, looking worried. Children who weren't used to controlling their mana would struggle immensely when trying to channel it into something. They needed guidance from an adult before anything else, which was why Florencia and Bonifacius, being so busy, had put Melkor in such an unfortunate position. It wouldn't have been so much of a concern if he had already started attending the Royal Academy and learned the process there. But he still didn't know his limits and was at great risk of getting caught up in the adult's mana flow. To minimize the danger of new participants being completely drained of mana, children were made to practice by drawing mana out of a face stone. Learning to control their mana would prevent them from passing out during actual ceremonies, but even that was exhausting for those without much experience to rely on. Trying to make someone perform mana replenishment without any training can only end in disaster. It had been impossible to predict what Detlinde might force Letizia to do while Ferdinand was absent, which was why it had been decided that Letizia would attend Spring Prayer as well. She would practice controlling her mana along the way. I see, I murmured. In that case, we should inform Lady Letizia that the kindness-filled rejuvenation potions she'll receive are not a cruel prank, as Wilfred and Charlotte once assumed. I was worried that she would end up hating Ferdinand despite his good intentions, but it seemed that Wilfred was more concerned about something else. Rosemine, he exclaimed, that's the last thing for us to be worried about. Focus on how other duchies are misunderstanding our religious ceremonies. I mean, you're not wrong, but most people should know from experience that supplying mana is exhausting. Few would make a little kid attempt it without any training. Yes, few would, but that hadn't stopped Ferdinand from working me half to death for my first Spring Prayer and dedication ritual. All of a sudden, leaving Letizia in his care seemed extremely dangerous. His standards were completely twisted at times, maybe because of the unique circumstances of his birth, or maybe because of the unreasonable expectations that Veronica had forced upon him. Hopefully they can stop him. Lady Detlinde's misunderstandings certainly are a concern, I said, but what concerns me more is that Lady Georgine did nothing to intervene. Sylvester, was Ferdinand told about the results of this purge? We had been told not to speak with each other duchies about Ehrenfest's situation, and to reveal only as much as Sylvester permitted. But I had to wonder, was Ferdinand aware of the likelihood that Guy Gerlach had survived the purge? Matthias had mentioned that one of the hidden rooms in which his father stored magic tools had been in a complete state of disarray when he and the others carried out their investigation. Guy Gerlach had always kept his rooms well organized for the sake of convenience, or so I was told. So it seemed that he had grabbed all the tools he would need in a frenzy before the knight's order reached his estate. Lorenz didn't think the state of the room was a sign of anything unusual, though. He said that in his own hidden room there isn't even a space to move around. Matthias hadn't been able to enter Guy Gerlach's most private hidden room, so that the order hadn't been able to see inside either. But if Ashes had spotted some glossy silver cloth wedged in the doorframe, though, he had torn it away without a moment's hesitation, insisting that it was very strange indeed. But nobody else had batted an eye. I told him a couple of things Sylvester said in response to my question. He mentioned in his letter that he'll try to see if Gerlach is with Georgine. I see, I replied. That's good. I'm impressed you managed to get all this past inspection. We have more than a few systems in place that allow for secret communication, he explained, then gave me a very meaningful look. Even when you read the letter yourself, you won't be able to decipher them. It seemed that I wasn't the only one who had a secret method of communicating with Ferdinand. That's good. That's good. Now we have at least a couple of ways of communicating with Ferdinand to get it past inspection besides the disappearing ink. After dinner, while Hartman was busy fetching me a copy of the new letter, I took my previous letter from Ferdinand into my hidden room. I detailed the results of his research into the divine protection ritual, though it was all written in invisible ink, meaning I would need to transcribe it before anyone else could read it. The letter mentioned that his handmade version of the magic circle was among the magic tools moved from his temple workshop to his estate, and that I was free to use it as long as I sent him my findings afterward. Well, I'm going to be sending stuff to him anyway, so it wouldn't be too much trouble to include a letter of my results. Why is he giving me this condition in the first place? He already said that everything in his estate belongs to me now, isn't it? Isn't this a bit cruel? Of course, his letter offered no room for debate. I couldn't expect anything less from Ferdinand, and that fact brought a smile to my face. For him to have made a magic circle on such a large scale with that many assistants, he must have had a lot of time on his hands when he first joined the temple. I muttered to myself, it was surely too big for a normal experiment if the circle I'd seen at the Royal Academy was anything to go by. Only a mad scientist would have gone and made it anyway. I came out of my hidden room and found that Hartman had returned with a transcription of the new letter. Thank you, Hartman. Just as you know, I intend to go to the library tomorrow. Ferdinand wants me to look for something that he says is necessary for the divine protection ritual. He said that he experimented with it once before. As one would expect from him, I suppose. I took the transcribed letter from Hartman and in turn gave him the transcription that I had just written. Feline, my apologies, but could you send an ordinance to Brunhilde, I asked? Give her the date and time of our upcoming meeting with the merchants and ask her to attend. Considering its relevance to Groschel, it makes sense for her to be there, would you not think? Tell her to bring several scholars as well. Understood. Oddly, Lazletta, Grisha, after visiting the library tomorrow, I will return to the temple. This is going to be an extended stay, so please make the necessary preparations. My attendants were the best of the best, so that was as much as I needed to say. They would sort out my clothes and daily necessities, contact Rosina and my chefs, and arrange for carriages to transport them. Furthermore, continued, the Gilberta Company will soon be called to the temple to alter my ceremonial robes. I will use that opportunity to order my summer clothes as well, so please be sure to visit that day. Understood. As I gave out one instruction after another, I read through the letter that Sylvester's scholar had transcribed. The section describing how Ferdinand was doing was very brief and contained nothing that Sylvester hadn't already told me. The rest was a simple list of all the things that Ferdinand wanted sent to Ahrensbach. It wasn't written in his handwriting. The scholar had transcribed it after all. So I reached the end swiftly and without getting sentimental. Ferdinand wrote only in extended euphemisms, but it was clear as day that Linde's return from the Royal Academy was causing him all sorts of problems. Letizia's education kept getting delayed as a result. Letizia might actually appreciate that, though. I remember her struggling to cope with Ferdinand's intensity. Oh, but now they're going to be together for all of spring prayer. Sending her some additional sweets was going to be crucial, and so was informing her about the kindness-filled potions. I was absolutely certain that things would end poorly if she thought they were a spiteful joke. A spiteful prank. The day after, I needed to prepare for the Divine Protections ritual and send Ferdinand his things, then accompanying everyone to my library. My library. That had such a nice ring to it. I giggled to myself, my eyes fixed on my library. I assumed that's Spanish, my bibliothèque, as I made a beeline to it. Of course, I hadn't failed to bring the bag containing the praise-filled magic tool. Today would be the day I was showered with kind words. We'll see, I don't know. I stood in front of the door, then grabbed the key hanging from a chain around my neck and slotted it into the keyhole. Red mana line streaked across the door, which opened on its own with a drawn-out creak. Welcome, Lady Rosamund, said the attendant waiting on the other side. His name was Losfam, and he was about as old as Ferdinand. I had seen Losfam several times before, including when we had moved the luggage here and when Lindy had visited. He had a peaceful demeanor, a calm voice, and a strong spirit despite his reserved nature. 3 traits that he shared with Fran and Zom. One could tell at a glance why Ferdinand had taken a liking to him, and he was easy to speak with because he came across as so familiar. It's been a while, Losfam, I said. As I mentioned in my ordinance to you, could I ask you to prepare Ferdinand's belongings? The castle will deliver them alongside the gifts we send over. In the meantime, I'm going to be reading in my library's bookroom, searching through the workshop, reading in my library's bookroom, making my hidden room, and have I mentioned reading in my library's bookroom? Yes, you mentioned it 3 times. Losfam had already seen me being dragged out of the library by Ferdinand, my arms still desperately wrapped around the book. There was no need for Hay to put on a front around him. Even if I tried to, it would crumble in the blink of an eye. Losfam briskly read through the letter I gave him, then looked up. Lady Rosamund, I must ask that you open the doors before you enter the bookroom. As it turned out, there were several that only I could open as the owner of the estate, and some led to rooms containing Ferdinand's belongings. I did as Losfam had instructed, then headed to the workshop, which also couldn't be opened without me, with Hartman and the others. The security here was impressive, but also highly inconvenient, crushed within my dreams of rushing straight to the bookroom. The magic circle for the Divine Protections ritual is somewhere within the magic tools he brought back from the temple, I said. I gave the letter containing the details to Hartman, so search well, everyone. I'm going to make my hidden room and then delve into some books. As if on cue, Angelica stepped forward. You must have a guard at all times, Lady Rosamund. Even here in your estate, I won't be of much help with finding the magic circle, so I volunteer. Everyone else seemed enthralled by the mass of magic tools, so Angelica was the only one who accompanied me. We took our leave and started upstairs to my room. You know, why are the rooms for girls always on the top floor, I wondered aloud. Because that's what people expect, right? Angelica replied. They'll get confused if they put them down somewhere else. I could tell that we weren't quite on the same page, but I decided not to address it. Instead, I continued onward and entered my room. Inside was all the furniture of the previous occupant. It was pretty old, but still in good condition. This room had been used by a woman who had accompanied Ferdinand to Ehrenfest when he was brought here before his baptism. He had looked up to her as though she were his mother, but then he had been taken to the castle to prepare for his baptism. By the time Ferdinand had returned to the estate, she had vanished. He assumed that Veronica had eliminated her. I wasn't at all invested in buying new furniture, nor was I going to sell these relics of the past that Ferdinand clearly valued. For these reasons, I intended to leave the room largely unchanged. To think Ferdinand saw the previous occupant of this room as a mother figure. I wonder what she was like. Angelica, do fetch that chair for me, I said, while making my way over to the hidden room by the bed. I registered my mana with it, then opened the door and got her to put the chair inside. Once that was done and she had come back out, I went inside and shut the door behind me. Now alone in my hidden room, I sat on the chair, reached into the bag on my hip, and took out the sound recording magic tool. A message from Ferdinand began to play. You are listening to this in the hidden room of the library I gave you, correct? He asked. Of course, I replied with a self-assured grin. There was a pause, then Ferdinand cut to the chase. He said that Georgine had moved to her villa and vanished from sight not long after the start of the winter. There were rumors that she had taken more retainers, and her servants were being watched so closely that not even justice could slip into their ranks. Something must have happened during the winter, Ferdinand continued. There is a chance that survivors of the purge had fled to Georgine's side. You must tell Sylvester not to lower his guard under any circumstances. Moreover, there are several boxes among my belongings that contain documents necessary for controlling the lies gangs. Sylvester must learn to assuage the lies gangs on his own, so leave the documents be for now. Bring them out only if you determine that he will not be able to manage otherwise. There sure are a lot of Sylvester-related warnings on this thing. How long until the part where he praises me? Probably the last thing. I understood all this was critical intelligence, but my hopes were so high that any disappointment would be devastating. My shoulders slumped. I continued to listen. Also, as a warning for you in particular. Enough warnings! Praise me already! Sylvester informed me that Ehrenfest will not be offering more business slots this year. Any duchess that take issue with this decision may become aggressive, so be wary. We are also nearing the time of year when the merchants cautiously adjusting to Ehrenfest will attempt their usual subterfuge. And once I recalled the time that Klassenberg had tried to force Corinne on us, Ferdinand was saying that we should expect more incidents like that going forward. A marriage agreed upon by both parties would not be too great an issue, but we cannot discount the prospect of merchants resorting to more violent methods. As it stands, the craftspeople you raised are generating most of the profit in Ehrenfest. Be it they're printing or making hairpins, they are very likely to be targeted. Most of the Gutenbergs would be busy in Kernberger, but Tully, our most talented hairpin craftswoman, was going to be in the lower city, as were Benno and Mark. How can I keep them all safe? I couldn't guard them at all times, and my charms required too much mana for commoners to be able to use them. The most I could do was warn them of the danger, but it seemed safe to assume that Benno and the others already understood the risks of doing business. They likely understood them even better than I did. For that reason, Ferdinand continued, I will teach you how to make protective charms that even commoners can use. Have those you care about wear them. Wow, okay. From there, he launched straight into his instructions. I rushed to grab my diptych and started writing everything down. These charms for commoners were made slightly differently and used separate ingredients from those meant for nobles. The ingredients you will need can be found within the library's workshop, Ferdinand said. Yeah, and I suppose you could use refilling the mana of those charms as an excuse to invite the recipients to the temple. Such charms will also serve as convenient gifts for celebration, much like the hair ornaments I gave you. Or the hair ornament I gave you. I paused and thought. Tuli was going to come of age at the end of summer, and it seemed that Ferdinand was very subtly encouraging me to use that opportunity to give her a present. You're as hard to understand as ever, I muttered, pursing my lips at the now silent magic tool. If you had just included a few words of praise, that message would have been perfect. Alas, I had been a fool to expect any kind words from Ferdinand. I heaved a very disappointed sigh, but just as I went to put away the magic tool, I believe you are working hard, came his voice again. What? I brought the tool back to my ear, wondering whether I simply misheard, and then, very good. Hearing those two words sent a wave of pride through me, like all my hard work had at last been rewarded. Maybe it was because he so rarely handed out praise that it felt so meaningful. I slid off the chair, a hand pressed against my naturally smiling face. Then I returned the magic tool to its bag and set it down in my seat. I could re-listen to these words of praise whenever I wanted. He acknowledged my request and praised me, so I need to work hard as well. To hear this praise again, I would need to get the results to earn it. All right, I explained. Now I'm motivated. I'm going to make charms for everyone. I threw open the door to my hidden room, and with a great big smile on my face, marched straight to the workshop. Reobtaining divine protections. While everyone else was searching through the magic tools, I dedicated myself to making charms. I was going to need a lot of them, since I intended to give them to my lower city family and the Gutenbergs. So I was thankful that Ferdinand was providing the materials. I would need to give the Guildmaster one as well, considering that I was summoning him alongside the Gilberta and Planta companies. Okay, that should be enough for now. After giving up my reading time to make a bunch of charms, I was still surprised that I'd given up my reading time to begin with. I arranged for everything that was required for the Divine Protections ritual to be taken to the temple. The ritual itself would take place tomorrow. Lady Rosemine Lenore said, I repeated the ritual after graduation, so I will go to the training grounds instead of participating tomorrow. As did I, Laisletta agreed. For that reason, I would prefer to focus on business in the castle. What will you do, Judith? I asked. I don't think I've prayed enough yet, so I'll pass this time, she replied. I could go to the training ground as well. Or if you need guards, I could still go with you to the temple. I will have more than enough guards, so you may train instead. I suppose I should contact Audley and Brunhilde as well. I sent them ordinances and received 2 refusals in response. Audley hadn't bothered to pray enough to warrant her repeating the ritual. Brunhilde was much too busy working with Groschel and sorting out the training of attendants. Not to mention she would be repeating the ceremony after her graduation anyway. Well, Grisha, since you're required to participate, don't forget to come to the temple, I said. Understood. We were reasonably confident that Roderick had become omni-elemental as a result of swearing his name to me, but we didn't yet have any concrete proof. The plan was for those who were name-sworn to perform their rituals after the adults. I wonder if Mother will come. If she did, we would be able to investigate whether changing whom a person was sworn to would impact the divine protections they received. Miriella would need to repeat the ritual again, but we really needed the data. I sent an ordinance to Elvira asking what her schedule was like. She replied that she would have some time in the afternoon. I shall accept a new sweets recipe in return, she added teasingly. Now that Cornelius has graduated, I no longer have a means of obtaining them. It was decided then I would give her the recipe for mousse, which we had also provided as this year's reward. The next day, my retainers who were going to be performing the ritual gathered before the third bell even rang. I opened the door to the workshop in my high bishop's chambers, handed out face stone brooches so that everyone could come inside, then began preparing the magic circle and such for being moved. Lady Rosemont, shall we take these to the chapel? Fran asked. Please. I've also told Hartman to go there after delegating the paperwork. Ideally, our ritual will be largely identical to the one performed at the Royal Academy. Because moving everything to the chapel involved manual labor, we called Gil and Fritz from the workshop to help Fran. They soon met up with Hartman's attendants, and the luggage was gone in the blink of an eye. Monica, has the orphanage been informed of our business? I asked. Yes, milady, they've been told not to enter the chapel today. I needed to focus on making sure nobody entered the workshop, so the rest of the preparations were being left to Hartman and Daniel. Miriella, Roderick, and Feline were acting as their scholar assistants. Once the luggage was all en route, I retrieved the face stone brooches from everyone, closed the door to the workshop, and then headed to the chapel. Hartman and the others were already there, carrying out the preparations as instructed. The shrine was adorned with cloth and fruit. The incense burners were lit, and a faint, sweet scent drifted through the air. A red carpet stretched through the altar, and the cloth with the magic circle on it was spread out. The circle at the Royal Academy had been embroidered, but this one was simply drawn with ink. It seemed that not even Ferdinand had wanted to go through that much effort. To test whether this magic circle functions and protections from each element can be obtained one at a time, I would like Angelica to try using it first, I said, because the circle was only drawn on. It was possible the parts had faded or rubbed away over the years, or maybe needed to be in a certain position to be used at all. I shall observe her ritual, but everyone else will perform alone as a standard in the Royal Academy. Perhaps the ritual is meant to be more private, or maybe complete focus is required. Someone needed to watch Angelica to ensure that she actually chanted the prayer, but everyone else could perform alone. We all shared her looks of concern. She had steely determination in her eyes and was exuding confidence, but that didn't mean a thing. At times like this, nobody had any faith in her. I will have Hartman perform after Angelica, I said. Not me, Cornelius asked, curious. The first performance was only a test, so it was fine for Angelica to do the honors, but tradition would dictate that we then go in order of status. Yes, as Hartman needs to return to his high priest work, I said. There were plenty of people who could stand in for Cornelius and guard me, but Hartman was the only one who could give out orders as the high priest. Plus, even though we were performing these rituals now, that was only to appease Wilfred and Hartman. Things in the temple were very busy at the moment, what with the baptism ceremonies and spring prayer right around the corner. I see, Cornelius replied. It certainly is more efficient to have Hartman go first, but for future reference, distributing the proper order of things is seldom received well in noble society. Or disturbing the proper order of things. He was accepting my methods, while at the same time taking care to remind me that most others will find it extremely offensive. I'll return to my workshop after observing Angelica's ritual, I said. Hartman will perform next, then Cornelius, Matthias, Lorenz, Muriella, Gracia, and Daniel. Report to me once everyone is finished. Muriella will need to repeat hers after Mother arrives. Understood. After confirming that everyone followed, I pointed to a crate by my feet. In this box are some mana rejuvenation potions. Do not forget that the circle must be completely and utterly filled with your mana. That was the last of my advice, so everyone stepped outside the chapel, leaving Angelica and me alone. The guard knights would be keeping watch while the rituals were performed. I took a rejuvenation potion from the crate and held it out to Angelica. Now, let us begin. You will speak the names of the specified gods so that we can confirm whether the ritual works. If all goes well, you will receive the divine protections you desire. Right. Angelica accepted the rejuvenation potion from me, then stood atop the magic circle. She knelt in the direction of the altar, touched the circle, and started channeling her mana into it. I am one who offers prayer and gratitude to the gods who have created the world, Angelica began. She then chanted the names of the 7 primary gods, speaking slowly and carefully so as to not make any mistakes. The symbols for fire and wind, her affinities, began to shine. Then 2 rather short pillars of light shot up from the magic circle. Seeing someone else perform the ritual made me realize just how weird my own had ended up being. Every element had started to shine from the start, and the pillars that followed had been twice as large as Angelica's. Comparing with others truly was important. My ritual must have been pretty unique. The pillars of light just kept growing when I obtained the divine protections of the subordinate gods. Next, Angelica started praying the names of the subordinates. Stife-breast, the goddess of the gale. Angriff, the god of war. Let me be granted the protection of those divinities who graced my prayers with their approval. Is she seriously only praying to the 2 gods she cares about? Angelica must have wanted nothing more than divine protection of those 2 gods, because she ended the prayer immediately after speaking their names. The pillars of light didn't grow in response. On the contrary, they were sucked into the magic circle and vanished entirely. I think that was a failure, I observed. So I do need to memorize the names of all the gods, Angelica muttered, her expression clouded. This isn't good. Today I discovered that filling the magic circle with mana didn't mean a thing if you disregarded the traditional method of the ritual or tried to shorten it. That was probably why even now, 3rd years of the Royal Academy had a shared class devoted to memorizing the names of all the gods. The time-honored process likely would have faded into obscurity had it not been made absolutely necessary. Let's try again, I said. See if the ritual will work if you repeat after Stenlook. Life returned to Angelica's eyes. As you will, she replied. I entrust everything to Stenlook. Master, I will comply because this is an experiment, but you must learn to do this yourself. Stenlook chattered in his very familiar voice as Angelica chugged the potion I'd given her. His reason for cooperating made me wonder whether he was somehow taking after the personality he was based on. I'll make sure to send Ferdinand the results of my research. Here we go, Angelica said. She got back into position atop the circle. Her mana now recovered and started again. I am one who offers prayers and gratitude to the gods who have created the world. It seemed that at this point even Angelica could remember the names of the 7 primary gods without issue. The problem was the subordinate gods. Or subordinates. Oh, subordinates of darkness. Chaosville, the god of warding. Furburger. Verbergen, the god of concealment. Angelica repeated after Stenluck there were gods whom she had never prayed to, so the magic circle didn't react at all. Incidentally, both of these subordinate gods had given me their divine protection. The fact that I was supposed to have Chaosville looking down out for me made me wonder why I was still getting bounced from one tragedy to another. Oh, subordinate of fire, Angrif, the god of war. That was the first name to get a reaction. The blue pillar representing the god of fire rose up a little. Wakelbren, the god of guidance, also reacted, and the pillar grew taller. Seeing this brought a smile to Angelica's face. She must have been feeling motivated because her voice became more upbeat as she continued to repeat after Stenluck. O subordinates of wind, Dragonr, the goddess of time, Stybref, the goddess of the gale. This time the yellow pillar rose. It seemed that Angelica had received Styfbryce's protection. I had thought that she would also receive the protection of Ordosconelli, the goddess of couriers, given her association with speed, but that ultimately wasn't the case. No other names produced a reaction from the magic circle, and Angelica reached the end of the ritual without incident. Let me be granted the protection of these divinities who grant my prayers with their presence. Grace my approval with their prayers with their approval. I cannot talk right. Sorry, I actually hit my thing. The blue and yellow pillars stretched up into the air, spun around, and scattered the light of their blessings over Angelica. The mana that had been filling the magic circle then streamed along the carpet to the shrine, where it was absorbed into the statues of the gods. That was a success, I said. If my own ritual was any indication, then Angelica had obviously obtained some divine protections. I couldn't tell whether she had received the protection of the goddess of wind, however. Did you obtain Shutsaria's divine protection by chance, I asked. I did. The yellow pillar vanished when I attempted to destroy the academy, so I think it worked this time. So the pillars just disappear if you don't get the divine protections of the primary gods, huh? The more you know. Angelica had experienced something rare during her first attempt at the ritual. Rare, but not particularly desirable. Nobody would want to see their hard-earned pillars of light vanish without giving any divine protections. Your success today was because of Stenluck, I said. Be sure to grant him mana, praise him, or some such. Right, it was because of you as well, Lady Rosemont, since you granted me Stenluck in the first place. I can't wait to go to the training ground to see whether I've gotten any stronger. I also want to try beating Master, even just once. Angelica was practically buzzing with excitement, but while her new divine protections would have an immediately noticeable effect on her mana efficiency, that itself didn't make her any stronger. Unless the protection of Angrif actually does work like that? The nice reporting on Angrif's divine blessing hadn't mentioned anything of the sort, so I wasn't convinced that she would receive a sudden buff or something. Still, needing to expand less mana when using Stenluck was a huge deal to Angelica. There are plenty of guard knights here at the temple, so you may go to the training grounds, I said. Be sure to tell Grandfather that you've obtained new divine protections. Perhaps that will encourage him to come to the temple as well? Bonifacius seemed pretty openly against the temple, but maybe hearing about Angelica's progress would change that? I exited the chapel to find my retainers waiting outside, watching over the door in their assigned order. Angelica succeeded, and the ritual seemed to be working as intended, I announced. Hartma, and you go. Come to my chambers after to report your results. Understood, Hartma replied, if you'll excuse me. He waved to Cornelius and then entered the chapel. Cornelius, you can wait here since you're next in line. Angelica, you may head to the training grounds. Everyone else, return to your duties for now. Roderick, Feline, Miriella, and Damiel went to help in the high priest's chambers while Matthias and Lorenz guarded me. Grisha was waiting in the high bishop's chambers. As for Angelica, she had already vanished. Once we were back in the high bishop's chambers, I went straight to my workshop. I gave Grisha a face stone brooch so she could enter as well. Then told her to guide my retainers through to me as they returned from their rituals. Grisha would need to be present during any reports from my male retainer so that I wasn't alone in the workshop with the boy. I'll prepare sound-blocking magic tools so that you won't hear what divine protections everyone obtained, I said to Grisha. Oh, and Fran, return to your normal duties. Grisha will handle our visitors. He would normally be working in the high priest's chambers, but he had waited to welcome me back from the ritual. Fran declined with a smile. It would not be acceptable for you to be alone in the high bishop's chambers without a single temple attendant. Lady Rosamond, what are you making in the workshop? Grisha asked. Charms. She gave me a curious look. Were you not also making charms in the library's workshop? The ones I made yesterday were for the Gutenbergs. I needed some for nobles as well. Ferdinand had given me ingredients when cleaning out his temple workshop, but he had prioritized putting the ones with high mana capacities and multiple elements in my chambers. That meant I could make charms better suited for nobles here than I would have been able to make in my library. Please bring Hartman to me when he returns, I said. As you wish. Inside the workshop, I chose the least mana expensive of all the charms I was wearing and started to replicate it. I would need two kinds, one that reflected mana attacks and one that reflected physical attacks. If we can offer some protections against an ambush, I'm sure the guard knights can deal with the rest. But if Ashes had trained the absolute heck out of the Archducal family's guard knights, as I understand it, the only thing they wouldn't have been able to deal with was an attack they couldn't see coming. After finishing the charms for Wilfred and Charlotte, I exhaled. My two siblings both had plenty of mana thanks to the compression method, but Melkor wasn't going to be compared to them anytime soon. Simply controlling his mana was too much for him at the moment, so I would need to make him an even less demanding charm. After all, I always told Ferdinand not to use me as a benchmark when dealing with kids. I remember everything perfectly. Wow, am I amazing or what? Lady Rosemine, are those the charms you intend to give the Lord Wilfred and Lady Charlotte for spring prayer? Came a voice. Oh, Hartmut, I put down the ingredients for Melkor's charms, stepped down from my stand, then went over to my desk. You finished your ritual, I take it? Hartmut looked at my newly made charms and smiled. You know, I will also be participating in spring prayer. I didn't really mind the thought of him giving them to him, but this was my chance to make a request of my own. Consider them yours, I replied with a grin, but only if you stop that weird prayer of yours. Teaching that thing to kids must be blasphemous. To my surprise, Hartmut refused. He said that the children of the former Veronica faction needed to know who had saved their lives, and if they remained ignorant of the fact and continued to complain about me, no amount of hard work would be enough for them to return to noble society. In his words, the prayer was an act of kindness to save them from that fate. Still, there must be other ways you could teach them that, I retorted. Doing it through prayer just didn't seem right. Hartmut cast his eyes down in thought, then looked up again with a suspiciously dashing smile. Uh-oh. Understood, Lady Rosamund. Your wish is my command. I do not know how the children will behave toward their enemies in the Archducal family, nor can I see how nobles will respond to their aggression, but as long as I receive your charm as a gift, their futures mean nothing to me. I shall stop at once. Oh, wait, what? Would getting rid of that prayer really cause such chaos? Is keeping it actually important for the children's future? Hold on a second. My head was starting to spin. Maybe he was right. Continuing the prayer was the right move. Before my thoughts could veer any further out of control, Grisha put a hand on my shoulder. Lady Rosamund, stay strong. Teaching the children to feel grateful to the Archducal family is admirable enough, but teaching them a modified prayer will only do them harm. Right, I muttered. Thank you, Grisha. You've cleared away the fog that was clouding my mind. Hartmut, you are to stop reciting that prayer at once, as I understood. Hartmut gave a regretful shrug and agreed. Moving on, I gave Hartmut a sound-blocking magic tool, then prepared a pen and some paper. Did you receive any divine protections from the subordinate gods? Yes, my lady. For my elements, I obtained the divine protections of the light subordinate, Gebordnung, the goddess of order, the fire subordinate, Onwalks, the god of growth, and the wind subordinate, Ordoshnelli, the goddess of couriers. Since you clarified that those are from your elements, can I assume that you obtained protections from other elements too? I asked, taking notes. Hartmut nodded, beaming. I obtained the life element through the divine protections of Dorleben, the god of longevity, and Schlaftram, the god of dreams. I'm told that having the life element is rather rare, so that's interesting. Perhaps because he had participated in the Harvest Festival and the Prededication Ritual? Hartmut had to obtain divine protections from subordinates I would never have expected. I obtained this many new divine protections after not even a year of performing religious ceremonies, he said. It seems that I would do well to participate in them even more fervently. A few more years of prayer here and I may surpass Lord Wolfried. There weren't many ceremonies in the temple that involved offering up one's mana, which explained why Wolfried, who had spent years supplying mana to the foundational magics, had ended up attaining more divine protections than Hartmut. Of course, Hartmut wasn't all too pleased about this fact. Wolfried gives his mana on a daily basis, so you won't have an easy time catching up to him, I said. I look forward to seeing which divine protections Charlotte obtains next year. Oh. So the only way he'll get more is if he becomes omni-elemental like Roderick. So, that would probably spur him to want to be name sworn to you even more. Because he was already wanting to do that anyway, but the fact that he could become omni-elemental, once you guys figure this out, is, gonna be interesting. I'd gathered all the information I needed from Hartmut, so I told him to leave the workshop before I could resume work on Melkor's charm. However, Cornelius was brought in by Grisha. I used the sound blockers to ask him the same questions. Just like Lenore, I obtained divine protections from Angraf, the god of war, and Stiffbreast, the goddess of the gale. Cornelius informed me. I am relieved to have maintained my honor as your guard knight. Cornelius had started to feel a little anxious about after his fiancée Lenore received Angraf's divine protection before he did. Men had their pride, I supposed. He must want to look cool in front of Lenore. I smiled at Cornelius, feeling heartened. He must have noticed the meaning behind my look because he averted his gaze and said, I also obtained divine protections of the darkness subordinate, Verdreos. So you had the darkness element now, then. Congratulations. Verdreos was the god of deliverance, entrusting with dispelling the gods to chaos, if my memory served me right. He was certainly a suitable god for a knight to receive divine protections from. It was a pleasant surprise, Cornelia said. I didn't expect to get any new elements. Mother's going to be here this afternoon. Perhaps you could report this to her as well. Or shall we instead send an ordinance to Lenore, I asked, eyeing him while chuckling to myself. Cornelius waved me away and refused. Then, after pinching my cheek, he left the workshop. I wondered, why does everyone pinch my cheeks, I mused aloud, rubbing my face. It really smarted, but I try my best to resume brewing Melkor's charm. I guess the name-sworn group is next. I'm eager to see how things went for them. After I chanted the names of the two supreme gods and the Eternal Five, the symbols of every single element began to shine, Matthias reported, while gripping a sound blocker. The magic circle had reacted before he had even spoken the names of the subordinate gods, which reminded me of what Roderick had said happened during his own ritual. Matthias continued, fire, wind, and earth were my only affinities to begin with, so I didn't expect all the elements to shine from the start. Most med nobles only had 2 elements, but Matthias had 3. I still remembered what a surprise it had been to see that his name-swearing stone was tricolor. Matthias' grandmother was an arch attendant who had moved with Gabriel from Arensbach to Ehrenfest, and she had greatly influenced the mana of the rest of her family. Keith Gerlach had been none too pleased about the Lies gang lording themselves over his kin, who possessed arch-noble-level power. I personally wouldn't have minded waiting for my graduation to perform the ritual, Matthias said, but I assume you are having all of your names sworn repeated now to see whether our being sworn to you has made us omni-elemental. I nodded. That was the case for Roderick, but I wanted more evidence. We should know for certain after Muriela swears herself to another and repeats the ritual. Doing that will prove fairly demanding, Matthias murmured. Yes, the process will place a tremendous burden on Muriela, but she was the only one who ever received permission to swear her name again. The answer to our question, whether one's elements were dependent on the person to whom one was sworn, would surely have a massive impact on the children currently in the orphanage and the playroom. Roderick felt a small boost after his name swearing, enough that he was able to brew with a little more success, I said. Did you notice anything after yours? In retrospect, I suppose I did start to feel the slightest bit more capable at brewing with elements I didn't have an affinity for. Based on that response, the impact of elements gained through name swearing was largely insignificant. Those who were closer to being lay nobles than standard men nobles, like Roderick, noticed the change very well, but for someone like Matthias, who was closer to being an arch-noble, the improvement was almost negligible. Incidentally, which subordinates did you gain divine protections from, I asked. Roderick had gained all the elements after swearing his name to me, but he hadn't obtained any new subordinates. Would the same hold true for Matthias? He smiled a little. I obtained divine protections from Angraf, the god of war, and Verdreos, the god of deliverance. As we continued our conversation, I noticed Fran waiting at the door of Grisha, who informed me that there was 4th bell. Fran says it's time for lunch, HG explained. Please come out of the workshop when you're done. I concluded things with Matthias and exited the workshop as instructed. Among those waiting for me were Lorenz and Muriela. They had evidently returned from the chapel. I had just finished my ritual and was drinking a rejuvenation potion when 4th bell chimed, Lorenz reported. Muriela decided that she would wait until this afternoon to perform hers. Very well, I said. I will wait until then to hear your results. Muriela will start the ritual. Very well, I said. I will wait until then to hear your results. Muriela will start the ritual, then Grisha will perform hers, so I will entrust Feline with guiding visitors to my workshop instead. Fred and Monica were preparing lunch when an ordinance flew into the room. The white bird landed in front of me and said, "This is Lenore. Lord Bonifacius will accompany Lady Elvira to the temple." Grandfather? We continued. My apologies. He decided that today would be a good time to visit. Any nobles would speak to the benefits of obtaining new divine protection, so I could see why he had decided to come. Perhaps I was to blame for having told Angelica to brag to him, but I hadn't expected him to react so suddenly. There would be plenty of tea and sweets since we were already expecting Elvira, but it wasn't really emotionally. I needed to do my best to show him all the temple's good points. Bonifacius was far from being an advocate of the temple, so I needed to make the most of this chance to win him over. He was a member of the Archducal family to boot, so changing his opinion would surely influence the rest of his generation as well. This is a lot of pressure. After briskly finishing lunch, I returned to the workshop with Feline and Lorenz and got straight to questioning the latter. Quickly, tell me which divine protections you obtained, I said. I'm afraid we won't have time to speak like this once my mother and grandfather arrive. Lorenz gripped the magic tool and gave me a teasing smile. Do you mean to say that you would rather spend more time with me, Lady Rosemine? I sighed and my eyes flitted to Feline. I merely thought it would be best to have this conversation while Grisha's away. Lorenz said nothing in response. He merely raised an eyebrow at me to indicate his confusion. Grisha gets uncomfortable when boys tease her, I explained. So don't go taking that same tone with her, Lorenz. In fact, Grisha was uncomfortable around boys in general. She wanted to stay as far away from my male retainers as possible, according to a report from Lazetta. She would also grimace whenever Lorenz tried to joke with her, as he did with me. Lorenz faltered, then sighed and adopted a more serious expression. I'll take more care with her. As it turned out, Lorenz had ended up with identical results to Matthias. Swearing his name to me had made him omni-elemental, and he had obtained divine protections from Angraf and Verdreos. If considered alongside Cornelius as well, that made him the third person to have received Verdreos' protection. Lenore didn't get that one, but maybe it's the easiest of the darkness subordinates for a knight to receive? Wait, no, I got it as well. I don't see the connection. Lorenz interrupted my thoughts with a mutter. If more people learn that you can get more divine protections by praying in the temple, my little brother and the others might not have such a hard time after they're baptized as the ops charges. Yes, though such great change will not come anytime soon, I noted. Please do tell Bertram how much praying has benefited you, since you are his brother by blood. He should be more inclined to believe you. I saw Lorenz off to the orphanage, then Feline entered again. She had with her a very nervous-looking Muriella, who accepted the sound blocker with trembling hands, and then stammered, Lady Rosemine, you became Omni Elemental, I assume. It is a result of the name swearing. Oh, I see. On top of that, I obtained the divine protection of Blonde for the goddess of sprouts. I'm glad, since I spent so much time praying to her with Lady Luridee. Students from various duchies had started praying after participating in our dedication ritual, but Luridee was the only third year among them who had obtained a new divine protection from its subordinate god. She and Muriella seemed to be fairly close friends. They both wanted the protection of gods who often appeared in love stories, so they both wore charms around their necks at all times. Muriella had shown me hers. Please continue to work hard for more divine protections, I said. Furthermore, once Mother arrives, you will need to give your name to her and repeat the protection ritual. I imagine it will be beyond strenuous, but I trust that you have the strength to endure it. Yes, my lady, Muriella replied, looking a bit tense. Gracia had yet to return from the chapel when Elvira arrived with Bonifacius and Lenore. Bonifacius had his retainers with him, so they made for a much larger crowd than I expected. I couldn't help but feel a little hesitant as I welcomed my mother and grandfather both. Fran poured us all some tea while Nicola brought in the sweets we had prepared. Bonifacius watched them with a hard expression. Perhaps trying to ease the atmosphere, Elvira let out a chuckle. I was ever so surprised when Lenore told me you wanted to come along, Lord Bonifacius. It seemed a good opportunity to see the temple while at the same time acting as your guest, he replied. This is no place for a woman to be alone. Oh, but I am quite fine on my own. Rosamund and Cornelius come here often, and it was Carstead who furnished the rooms. She had received a very thorough description of the temple after Carstead and Eckert scoped the place out, so she no longer held any reservation about visiting. The temple is well cleaned, and, thanks to my superb attendance, you are both perfectly comfortable, I said. Would you not agree? Bonifacius drank the tea that Fran had poured for him, ate one of the cookies that Nicola had brought over, then gave a curt nod. He seemed to understand that life here wasn't all that different from life in the castle. Moving forward, the temple will be hosting more children, including Melkor and those from the playroom, I said. They can study from the written lessons here, but I'm afraid they will lack for physical training. I would like for you to remedy that if you are willing. You want me to train the children of the former Veronica faction? Bonifacius murmured. Indeed, most of them will be sworn to the Archducal family. They have quite literally entrusted us with their lives so that they can serve as our retainers. How could we not train them in return? Those who were now living in the temple were a lot more likely to end up serving Melkor and me. I had struggled to secure retainers while I was asleep in the Dreef because none of the children had really known me. It had been up to them to decide whom they served. Meeting with them often was therefore very important. Moreover, I continued, your grandson Nicholas has entered the temple as an apprentice blue priest. Please grant his wish to become a knight. I shall consider it. I thank you ever so much. Even if he only came by every now and then, Bonifacius' presence would instill hope in the kids who wanted to be knights. Not to mention, Melkor's and my guards could take turns watching their training. Incidentally, grandfather, have Angelica's divine protections made her any stronger? It wasn't by much, but she became faster. Stenlick also seemed longer than before. Although most people wouldn't even notice these things for someone as skilled as Angelica, these slight improvements meant everything. I still won, of course, but it was reasonably hard fought. Angelica had moved faster and attacked more ferociously than Bonifacius was used to. He maintained that he hadn't even come close to being defeated, but her improvements had been enough to make him curious about the rituals we were performing and the steadily increasing strength of my retainers. Mother, grandfather, since you come all this way, would you like to perform the ritual for obtaining divine protections? Grandfather, with all the time you've spent offering monarchs of the Foundation's magic, I am sure you will receive protections aplenty. No, I don't think I will, Bonifacius replied, his expression dark and menacing all of a sudden. I was shocked to realize just how much he hated rituals. Elvira giggled and stepped in to explain things. Rosemine, as much as I would love to participate, not even I, a writer, can recall the names of all the gods. It was decades ago that I learned them and the prayers in class. Lord Bonifacius and I would both need a lot more time and practice before we could perform the ritual. Isn't that right, Lord Bonifacius? Right, I am interested, since Rosemine says the performing mana replenishment is enough to secure more divine protections, but I'll give it a try once I'm better prepared. Elvira hadn't forgotten the names she needed to know for her love stories, but she couldn't remember all the minor gods. To her, even the words and order of the prayer were hazy at best. Well, that's fair. After all, even Damiel had said that he would need to relearn the prayer for the ritual. For nobles who had memorized the names of the gods decades ago, and and then had no use for most of them since, it seemed entirely reasonable that some review would be needed. Rosamund, we have here a letter from the Ob, Avara said. He has granted me permission to assist with this ritual and said that he will entrust this business with Miriella to us. She handed the letter in question to Feline, who then passed it to me. And once I started to read this new correspondence from Sylvester, it could be summarized quite simply. I'll turn a blind eye to any less than traditional dealings with Miriella, but only if you immediately share your results and allow me to perform the ritual too. It makes sense to have him redo the ritual sooner rather than later. He'll benefit greatly from being able to use his mana more efficiently. Making sure the Archducal family had more mana at its disposal was one of our top priorities at the moment. In an ideal world, Bonifacius would join Sylvester and secure any divine protections alongside him. Grandfather, would you be here when Sylvester comes for the ritual, I asked. It would be very convenient if you could attend, but he would need to learn the prayer in the names of the gods in quite a hurry. I would think so, he replied, then looked at the letter with a deep frown. That said, I didn't think Sylvester would be willing to come to the temple. I suppose I'm not as young and sprightly anymore. I wanted to shout that isn't the problem at the top of my lungs, but I just barely managed to hold my tongue. I mean, Sylvester came to the temple wearing blue robes and tagged along for spring prayer forever ago. He was even pumped up about hunting in the lower cities for us. I don't think age has anything to do with it. You couldn't pay me to reveal that my first meeting with Sylvester had been in the temple, but it was news that would shock anyone else as speechless. An Archduke putting on a disguise and to participate in spring prayer was just unthinkable. Only now that I was accustomed to noble culture could I appreciate the pure craziness of Sylvester's past actions. Now then, Mother, let me give Miriella to you so that we can report back to the Ob. Grandfather, could you wait here? Name swearing wasn't something to be mentioned in public, so I made sure to speak directly. We will perform it privately in the workshop. I want to see this ritual for obtaining divine protections again, Bonifacius said, a stern look on his face. Would it be problematic for me to watch one? He was still somewhat on guard against the temple and its rituals, but he seemed interested. Daniel was about to begin his, so you could ask for his permission to attend. I was well aware that Daniel would never refuse Bonifacius, not in a million years. He was a noble sacrifice, thrust into the firing line to spare Gracia from having a man intrude on her ritual. If we sent word ahead of time, he'd at least be able to prepare emotionally. The ritual is not to be performed in public, and you are surely too considerate to enter the chapel alone with two women, I continued. In the temple, it was seldom appropriate to leave men and women alone together. Daniel is my only male retainer who has not yet performed the ritual, so please ask him. Bonifacius nodded. Cornelius said, guide our grandfather to the chapel, if you would. Do not let anybody else attend the ritual, though. Daniel will not be able to concentrate with too many eyes on him. Got it, Bonifacius replied in his stead. I'll get my retainers to wait outside the chapel. Come on, Cornelius. And with that, Bonifacius practically dragged Cornelius out of the room. I watched them go, then took Avara and Muriel to my workshop. Lenore accompanied us both as an observer and a guard. I unlocked a box sitting atop one of my shelves, then peered around at the namestones neatly arranged inside. After a moment, I picked up the one belonging to Miriella and said, Miriella, I return your name to you. From there, I pretty much performed this name-swearing ritual, or swearing ceremony in reverse. I stuck the namestone's mana back to me and watched as the white cocoon surrounding it slowly disappeared, revealing an equally white box. As expected, Miriella's name was inside. I am honored, Miriella said. She looked closely at her returned name, then inhaled sharply and knelt before Avara. Lady Avara, I ask that you accept my name. I spent my days immersed in your stories, and thought then I could feel the visits of Blanfa from the very bottom of my heart. I desire nothing more than to weave beautiful stories with you, to spread them throughout the world and teach as many people as we can. Oh, Miriella, my kindred soul, I accept your name, Avara answered, extending a hand to the white box. She then poured her mana into it all at once as I instructed. Miriella had expected another wave of pain, but it never came. She looked at Avara in shock, not having suffered at all. That concludes the name-swearing, Avara said. Miriella, would you please repeat the protection ritual? Yes, my lady. We left the workshop to find that Gracia had returned from performing her ritual. She had apparently been very taken aback when, upon coming out of the chapel, she found herself standing face-to-face with Bonifacius and his retainers. Daniel was very troubled when he heard that you granted Lord Bonifacius permission to watch his ritual, she said. I thought it better that his ritual be intruded upon than yours, Gracia. Daniel is an honorable sacrifice whom we shall not forget. Gracia placed a hand on her ample chest and sighed in relief, having no doubt just pictured Bonifacius bursting into the chapel during her ritual. I must find a way to express my thanks to him later. You could offer to be his bride, I suggested with a cackle. He genuinely cried tears of joy. Gracia shook her head with a solemn expression. I am too uncomfortable around men to ever want a husband. I will refuse to marry unless you order it. Too bad, Daniel. She didn't consider you for a second. Oh, poor guy. Well, there's still Feline. So, I mean... Thanks to Miriella's assistance, we have determined that one's elements are tied to the person one is sworn to, I announced. On top of that, everyone obtained additional protections. Many even obtained new elements. Our experiment here has provided astounding results. Hartman had obtained the life element and divine protections from various subordinates. Cornelius had obtained the darkness element and protections from primarily fighting-type gods. Matthias and Lorenz had essentially become omni-elemental after swearing their names to me. Grisha had as well, and she obtained the divine protection of Verbergern, the god of concealment. As for Miriella, she had ceased speaking omni-elemental once she was no longer name-sworn to me. Her elements were now being influenced by Elvira's instead, though she still had the divine protection of Blonde for the goddess of sprouts. I gave Roderick a report consolidating all these new findings with the names redacted, of course, and told him to deliver to Sylvester in the castle. The ceremony was interesting enough, Bonifacius remarked. I'll work on remembering the prayer and the names of the gods. As will I, Elvira agreed. It would be wonderful to have the divine protection of Blonde for the goddess of sprouts and Gamartur, the goddess of language. Both appeared to be satisfied, Bonifacius because he had seen Daniel's ritual, and Elvira because she had obtained a new loyal vassal and found out about Cornelius obtaining the darkness element. It was great to see such optimism from two members of an older generation that reviled the temple. Perhaps their enthusiasm would help shift the general opinion among nobles. Even after seeing it with my own eyes, I'm struggled to believe that someone can receive new elements, Bonifacius said, then shot a glance at Daniel, who was slumped over in disappointment. He knew which protections Daniel had obtained because he had been there for the ritual. Whereas I knew because I'd put together the report for Sylvester. There isn't much I can say except that they were very appropriate for him. Daniel had obtained the divine protection of Libeskelf, the goddess of binding, and the light element with it. From the wind element, which he had already possessed, he obtained the protection of Dragana, the goddess of time, and Jugarius, the goddess of separation. He had prayed desperately to Libeskelf in the past, hoping that he would get to marry Bridget, but he hadn't prayed to Jugarius at all. The fact that she had given him her protection anyway no doubt meant she had taken a liking to him. Oh, the goddess of separation! I'm never getting married, Daniel murmured, his grievance made all the more serious by the vacant look in his eyes. Oh, poor guy, I want to hug him. Can we not give him a hug? Oh, I gotta stop, though! Clarissa's invasion. I'll see you guys in the next one.